But now there's overwhelming scientific evidence to show that that spin is false. Now, there are certainly more toxic herbicides than Roundup, and unfortunately, because of the herbicide-tolerant weeds that the use of Roundup is creating, in 2 years recently, the use of the more toxic 2,4-D went up 237%. So we're talking about massive increases of toxicity in our soil because of genetically engineered crops or because of the failure of it to be successful, so that they have to bring in these more toxic 2,4-D to kill the crops, to kill the weeds that the Roundup is no longer killing.
What's your recommendation for women who are pregnant?
I would say definitely don't eat genetically engineered foods. Go and get the shopping guide. Now, we've seen so much evidence of possible problems. Now, we know that when you take a pregnant mouse and you feed the pregnant mouse DNA, fragments of that DNA end up in the brain of the offspring. Now, that means if you eat genetically engineered foods, theoretically it is possible, and it hasn't been tested, so we don't know it because there's only been one human feeding study ever published. But it's possible that the genes would pass through the placenta, and in this case through the blood-brain barrier, and influence the nature of the offspring. And I mentioned earlier that when mice or rats were fed genetically engineered soy or corn, they had changes in the DNA expression of the embryos, higher death rates, smaller bodies, that some appeared to be sterile. And so I would suggest that pregnant women in particular should stay away. And it's also good for pregnant women to eat organic in general, because there are different stages in the pregnancy which are sensitive to formation of the fetus. And if some toxin comes in, maybe some pesticide residues, it might have an influence. Now, I don't want to scare people. The thing is, if people get nervous, that's also a toxin. And so now they have two toxins. Sure. They have the toxin of the food and the toxin of the nervousness.
We ended last hour talking about President Obama and his campaign pledge to label GM foods. Hasn't done it yet. Of course, he's been going at great guns with, his foreign policy and for the economic situation. Do you think this is afoot? Are they going to do this?
Well, I've gotten some very negative results out of the White House so far regarding the GMOs. The thing is, they haven't said anything about the labeling, but Vilsack just came out this week. He's the Secretary of Agriculture, basically saying that they want to ramp up more promotion of genetically modified crops around the world. So that's he was the Biotech Governor of the Year in 2001. We were hoping he'd have more of an open mind. Also, Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney and later vice president, who was in charge of the false policy that was created by the FDA, he's also been touted for a possible position on the food safety team inside the Obama White House. And a recent appointment as deputy secretary, I believe, in USDA was from someone from the Gates Foundation, and they funded millions of dollars for genetic engineering in Africa. So I've been very disappointed with the pro-GMO stance of the USDA and of, in this case, Taylor and food safety from the Obama administration. But the thing is, all of that would not matter at all if genetically engineered foods are labeled, because if they put a labeling law and say, okay, 18 months from now, everything that's GMO needs to be labeled.
And pretty good size, too, Jeffrey. Not one of these things that you need a microscope to see.
Exactly, and also comprehensive labeling, so no exceptions and loopholes like they have in several countries. By the time the labeling law kicks in, no one will be using GMOs, because everyone knows it's like a skull and crossbones, since most Americans say they wouldn't eat GMOs if they were labeled.
I'm convinced that this vast audience has had an effect on aspartame, for example.
And that's genetically engineered, by the way. They use genetically engineered microorganisms to create it, and it has absolutely, you've already talked about it in your audience. It's just, I write about it in my book. It's a lot of problems related to aspartame.
It's Karen Stern in California on the wild card line. Hello, Karen.
Oh, hi, gentlemen. George, I love your show. I have to tell you that. I have been listening to you forever, and I'm so excited I got through. I can't hardly stand it. But anyway, this topic is awesome. And before I forget, if you could consider having a topic also about irradiation and radiation meat.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next half hour with Jeffrey, but go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Anyway, I wanted to support Jeffrey in his battle and also education. It's all over the map as far as some of our educators in our local JCs teaching that BST and genetically modified food is just, the cat's meow, everything's great, blah, 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 and I'm pulling my hair out going, no, you people don't understand. So I am so happy that you're covering this topic. Also, sometime back when I was married, we milked cows, had a nice little dairy going. My ex-husband decided to introduce to our girls the BST bug shot, and I kind of basically looned out, to say the least, and it probably was a driving force in getting divorced. It wasn't the only thing, but that, didn't help matters any. I was doing my research. I did a lot of nutrition background, trying to understand how this shot worked, and I was just sideways with what I found. I saw cows' udders get engorged with milk. And people, some people that don't have agricultural background might not be able to understand. But when a cow calves and she is coming into the milk barn, she is in the beginning of her cycle of milk production, and it'll go up and it'll peak, and it'll come back down again. Well, in giving this injection to these cows, her bag gets so engorged with milk that the natural peak and then the natural drop does not occur. She doesn't rest. Her whole system is cattywampus, to say the least. Jeez. And her body goes into an overdrive mode, which your guest stated. And not only that, her liver, her kidneys, her whole internal organs start going cattywampus. And this poor cow, by the time she's done with her lactation cycle, is burnt. She is burnt. Her liver and her kidneys are so overworked and so overstressed that she becomes toxic internally.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And these poor animals, it's a crime. It is just a crime for people to do this. And I've been involved in the livestock business ever since I was a little kid, and I'm 55. And it's I support you 100%. And the genetically modified stuff, hey.
Yeah, and I want to say that you're having some trouble maybe convincing other people. Well, I have some good news for you.
Hold that when we come back, Jeffrey. The good news. Next hour, Rosemary Ellen Guiley joins us as we talk about dreams and demons. However, when we come right back, we'll finish up with final calls with Jeffrey Smith on genetically modified foods on Coast to Coast AM. Jeffrey, you were talking about some good news here, so let's talk about that before we take final calls.
Yes, the caller was wondering how that she can dislodge the myths and the people that she's talking to about how GMOs are good and all that. Well, we've been working for years to create the materials to help people do that. If you go to healthiereating.org, we have free videos, a free video called Hidden Dangers in Kids' Meals, which focuses on the dangers for children. We have a video called Your Milk on Drugs, Just Say No, 18 minutes that shows how RBGH is dangerous and talks about a lot of the things that she mentioned about cows. We have a whole campaign for healthier eating in America with a focus on children, a focus on religious organizations. We have doctors' prescription materials, and we've packaged also a special activist package specifically for Coast to Coast listeners that they can get, which includes handouts and a video and an audio and a book and all that. So we have a scripted PowerPoint presentation online. You can download our shopping guide online. You can download materials to hand out. Basically, it's a one-stop activist center. And if you can't access the internet and you want to get that special to Coast, you can call 888-717-2222. 7000, 888-717-7000, and that's only for ordering that special. But we've been working for years, and we find that our materials, like you're hearing tonight, there's so much compelling evidence that GMOs are